All right, and thank you. All right, so we have three things on our agenda today. First being our primary guest, esteemed Senator Aisha Wahab. And we're welcoming Senator Wahab back. We had her come to talk to the club in May of last year, and she has graciously agreed to speak to us again now in February after her first legislative session and a lot of accomplishments. All right, so Senator Wahab was elected in 2022 to the new District 10 and has seen much success in her first legislative session. And I'm just going to let her take it away from here. Senator Wahab, please go ahead. All right, I see her online, but she's muted. Senator Wahab, can you hear us? Senator Wahab, we cannot hear you if you are, I see you're muted. Can you hear us? Okay. But you seem to be muted somehow.
Try using the admin unmute.
Can we unmute her?
We can't unmute her remotely. I've asked her to unmute.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I apologize. I don't know what was happening with that particular phone, so I just logged on a different phone. All right, let's start from the beginning. What would you guys like me to cover?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Your legislative accomplishments from the last session, and especially the one about the social housing bill. We're super interested in that one.
Definitely. Well, first, I just want to thank you guys for having me again. I really do appreciate being able to talk to the district. We just were at a couple of events, one that we also hosted for Black History Month. And this past year, so I do just want to give a high level overview. The legislative cycle is a 2-year cycle, right? So we just completed our first year. We're in our second year. So we have 2 legislative cycles in one Senate term because it's 4 years. we had pretty much every single bill that hit the governor's desk from me was signed into law except for one he vetoed, which was the caste discrimination bill. And we are very proud of that package for the most part, because we started on our election was a very close race. And so we didn't get a chance to start as early as some of the other senators. We had to wait and orientation and all of the things that we have to do. I do also, just for like the human side of being elected to office, when you go to Sacramento, you have to find a place to live, you have to hire staff, you have to get your office set up, you have to hire staff in your district office, you have to move, you know, some of the material out that you no longer want to have in your office, the whole nine. So we had a lot to struggle with. We introduced a number of bills, some that were killed in appropriations, some that were, you know, I'm going to say watered down by committees significantly to the point where there is no purpose of carrying that. One of them being a lobbying reform bill that was watered down to the point that it doesn't actually have a deep effect on what lobbying does in our state. I will say that was a very controversial bill. A lot of staff made it seem as though they can no longer work in the building and it would stifle their growth. That is not the case. The honest truth was that people would leave the building in the Capitol and within 24 hours be back in the Capitol as lobbyists, knowing all the relationships that they have, knowing exactly what the strategy is for bills and much more. And my bill was primarily to have a 12-month cooling off period, very similar to that electeds have to follow. I would love a lifetime ban on this, as we have seen in the federal levels regarding military and so forth. But this is a problem, and this is something that I hope that in the future moves forward. We sat on 8 committees, which is quite significant for a freshman, as well as I chaired the Senate Public Safety Committee. And I have historically said this to everybody, and I'm currently still the chair of public safety, even with a new pro tem. And the reason why is because I try to be as fair as possible. We often see that with the national news and rhetoric and activists and lobbyists and so forth, that the pendulum of justice tends to swing left and right on what we should do about public safety. For me, it's not about listening to the rhetoric. It is primarily seeing what is good for all of our communities. And I often vote on issues that really are well balanced, that are not extremely biased, that actually protect people and much more. Because in the Senate Public Safety Committee, you can actually do a significant amount of harm, and you could also focus on the things that actually need support, right? So there was Senate Bill 14, which was introduced by a Republican, and it was killed historically multiple times. And I was able to amend it to protect children. And so the bill basically was a bipartisan effort, eventually signed by the governor, where if you traffic children, it is considered a serious crime. And there are people that were opposed to that. And I said, I'm so sorry, but this is a law that needs to take place. So we passed a number of laws, including a bill that I pushed, which was for a constitutional convention that the governor introduced with me to really highlight gun reform laws across the nation. And so I'm very proud of being able to do that. I also spoke about it at the White House convening, the largest convening of the Biden Harris administration regarding gun control and violence and prevention of violence. So we have had a number of successes, and I'm very proud to be able to navigate what the Capitol is about and focus on the issues that really matter to our district, and very specifically about housing. So SB 555 is our social housing bill. It is the first of its kind in the entire nation to be passed and signed into law. And it had largely 4 components. One is that social housing is that housing that is owned and managed by a public agency, a local authority, a limited equity housing cooperative, or a mission-driven nonprofit entity that's solely for the benefit of residents and households unable to afford market rent. Number 2, it's supposed to accommodate a mix of households, from those with the lowest incomes to moderate income households unable to afford, again, market rate rent. Number 3, it's supposed to provide its residents with strong protections against eviction, unaffordable rent increases, and other abuses that we see across this district and across the state. It is also number 4 to protect permanently these assets from privatization, right? We are trying to develop housing that is supposed to be there for generations for people to be able to thrive in. And 5th, it's supposed to provide residents with the right to participate directly and meaningfully in decision-making affecting the operation and management of their homes. Now, one can argue, okay, what does that really mean? Don't we have HOAs? Don't we have this? I will tell you that when I introduced this bill, there was a number of elected officials, my colleagues, as well as so-called affordable housing groups that asked me to amend this bill to include market rate housing, right? This bill is to identify 1.4 million affordable housing units. And I said, no, I'm not going to amend my bill to include market rate. Market rate is doing just fine. We see in every single city that housing is talked about. The goals for those cities of developing market rate housing is hit every year, right? For the most part. The homes that are not being built are affordable housing homes, median family income homes, low income and extremely low income, let alone protecting renters, right? Which is a big problem. And I'm the only senator in the entire Senate that sits on the Renters Caucus with roughly 4 assembly members, right? So we do not get our fair, shake, if you will, on a lot of housing issues. And in fact, a lot of the renters issues don't even hit the housing committee. They hit Senate, Judiciary, or Assembly side. And the honest truth is that the majority of my colleagues are not renters. And I often tell people renting today is very different than what it was 20 years ago. We pay for our own parking space every single month. We pay not only the security deposit, but we also pay for a pet deposit as well as a pet fee every single month. And our generation is really, really struggling in paying down student loan debt, potentially saving for a home, taking care of our elders, or even starting a family of our own. And it is simply just not fair, right? So I'm very proud that this bill is the first step to develop the framework and the definition of what social housing truly is. This is one of the things that we want to do as much as possible. And I will say that last year we had an intense year. We also were able to pass a couple of other bills that were backed by Me Too International, including SB 465, as well as SB 464. SB 464 was the Survivors of Sexual Assault Bill of Rights. It allowed for an increased rape kit testing and expands the rights of the individual survivor a little bit more with some legal support. We also have allowed for all state employees to practice and take the day off for their own cultural or religious holiday. We know in our district we're incredibly diverse, and that has to trickle down into what else we're trying to do at the statewide. And I will say, with all of that said, we have, of course, received a significant amount of pressure. Clearly I am dealing with a recall as well. And it's based off the caste discrimination bill, which would have been the first of its kind in the nation. It was watched internationally. Time Magazine covered it. We had diplomats write about it. We had the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Discrimination write in support of it, as well as Dr. Cornel West and so many other organizations, including Me Too International. And sadly, that was vetoed. And, we are working as much as possible to highlight vulnerable communities. And I think I've shared with you guys in the past, I come from a vulnerable community. I grew up in foster care. My parents and family and extended family members are immigrants or refugees. And I understand the concerns that they have at a deeper level. And I do want to highlight a couple of bills that we have been working on this year. Some are carryovers of last year. Some are brand new bills that I think would be incredibly important for you guys to take a look at and see if you guys want to support. We have SB 402. It's a 5150 bill. When I served on Hayward City Council, and I did a lot of work in our police department and reforms there. And I learned that people that do the involuntary holds at the state law, basically police officers and psychiatrists are allowed to say that there needs to be a 72-hour hold on this individual who is experiencing a crisis. But our licensed marriage and family therapists, our licensed clinical social workers, and a lot of other licensed mental health professionals do not have the legal capacity to 5150 an individual, even though they are the ones that are trained and are at the front lines of working with individuals and families that are dealing with somebody that has mental health issues, right? And so this bill would allow for these licensed mental health professionals to be able to make that judgment call, right? Without necessarily having to involve the police. Now, the police are not removed from this particular effort. However, they don't necessarily need to be the first line of response, right? We want those people that have a relationship and built the relationship and know the case work and the background of these individuals to be able to make that call before it gets to a point where police officers need to get involved. It is supported by the chiefs of police. It is also largely supported by more than 42 Bay Area organizations. And of course, we want more and more support. And we have a couple of other bills, but the bill that I'm probably the most interested in is my SMILE Act. Now, SB 980, it's a dental bill. And specifically, when I go around the district, I have a lot of people that reach out to me and talk to me about if they are on Medi-Cal, they can get their teeth removed, if not one tooth, two teeth, 3, 4, 5, 6, but they cannot get teeth implants unless they prove that they have something as extreme as cancer of the jaw. We have a silver tsunami with so many of our elders aging into the retirement population. We also know that nearly 1/3 of Californians are on Medi-Cal because, let's be honest, not all of us save up for retirement. Not all of us can. We're struggling. And Medi-Cal is an option to provide some of those benefits. But Medi-Cal is not providing one of the most foundational benefits that is needed by our aging population, let alone our lower income population. And so this bill, I have gotten 24 of my Senate colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, to co-author. We are going to be pushing it through. We know that it will get watered down because there's probably a huge price tag to it. And we know that any bill right now that costs money, we are told will not move forward. But it is something that I introduced because I think it's important. And so I hope that you guys definitely take a look at SB 980. I will also say I have introduced a number of retail theft bills as well as fentanyl bills, specifically, allowing cops to pursue an individual that is, committing retail theft, organized theft, if you will. We also have been sitting on a fentanyl working group. We know that this is a big crisis right now, and fentanyl is a drug that is synthetically made, and it has come from the East Coast. It's usually in a powdered substance of some sort. And the amount that's on the tip of a pencil can kill more than just one person, right? And our bill is largely focused around treatment, mental health, substance abuse efforts, as well as actual locations that can have substance abuse treatment for people, which we see. The two things that I'm seeing the most of is we do not have enough beds for mental health support, nor do we have enough beds for substance abuse. We also have introduced 2 other bills regarding our skilled nursing facilities to ensure that they do not discriminate against an aging individual, nor discriminate against an individual that only has Medi-Cal and not private insurance. So as much as possible, if you take a look at the theme of what we try to focus on, it is largely protecting our most vulnerable communities, providing better services and resources to them, as well as, even for example, working in technology in the Bay Area, we know that policies don't catch up to technology. And so I have also introduced another bipartisan effort to protect children of any images that are created by artificial intelligence that depict a child in an abusive way. Some will refer to it as child pornography, that be illegal as well. So there's a number of bills that we have introduced. I will say that we are only allowed as senators to introduce roughly 40 bills every 2 years. We are past that limit, and we're going to request waivers and so forth, but we're also going to have to see, what happens. I will say that this year we had a new Senate pro tem, which is basically, an equivalent of the mayor of the city council, if you will. And our Senate pro tem is Mike McGuire. And Senator McGuire has appointed me as the assistant majority leader, as well as chair of public safety. I'm still the chair, as well as the chair of a budget subcommittee, sub 5, which covers infrastructure, it covers public safety, it covers housing, and it covers transportation. And I do have a bill regarding Bay Area transit consolidation, because we have 27 public agencies. They are all taking funds from the pie, if you will, or the pot, but it does not make sense to have that many agencies when we don't necessarily see a benefit as the regular public. I want public transit to be faster, cheaper, safer, and more coordinated, if you will. And we are working on that. There's been a lot of conversations in regards to that. And now, because of the bill that I introduced, there's 3 other bills, all focused on Bay Area transit. I'm glad that we're able to spark a conversation to actually really focus on what we see as Bay Area public transit moving forward. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Wow, Senator Wahab, that is awesome how much you have accomplished. And we do want to open this up to questions from the room and also on Zoom. So if you have a question in the room, please raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone. And if you have a question on Zoom, raise your digital hand. I do want to note that since I announced elected officials in attendance, we've had Richard Mellinger, Councilmember Richard Mellinger attending, as well as Mayor Klein just joined us in the room. Yes, and I had already announced Russ Melton, a council member, and there are 2 trustees from the Sunnyvale School District here. Eileen. Yes. All right. Gail has a question. It's Gail Rubino.
Hi, I'm Gail Rubino. Thank you very much for joining us today. And you've done a great job. I have to congratulate you on that. And you're a great speaker. You could be you can go forever. It's amazing. So good. I forget the word for that, but you could stand up and talk for 24 hours. It's great. That's it. Anyway, the question is, what are your thoughts on mobile home rent stabilization statewide? That's A. And B is rent protections across the spectrum for both renters and mobile home residents. Thank you.
Definitely. So on Hayward City Council, I expanded rent control from 1,000 units to 10,000 units. Now, even when I went to the peninsula, maybe about 3 weeks ago, I was sitting with Senator Becker and Assembly members Berman and Pappen, and I brought up rent control. There was a lot of city council members saying, what are you guys doing about redevelopment and housing and so forth? And, my question back to a lot of people is, what are you guys doing about rent control? Right. And the reason why I bring up rent control is because people think it's a dirty word, right? Or dirty phrase, I should say. And it's not. It is very much needed, right? Under rent control, you are able to, as a landlord, still raise your rents, at whatever the city allows, right? Whether that be 5%, whether that be 7%, 3%, whatever the case is, depends on the city. And in Hayward, we have a lower income city. It's my least affluent city in my entire district, right? When I first got elected, it was about 65,000 as a median family income. And all the neighboring cities, the median family income was about 100,000 or more, right? And so you clearly see that there's a disparity there, right? And you clearly see that rent control is a tool to help our most marginalized people. Now, people say, oh, Aisha, what if they live there for 10 years and they're not trying to move out? Here's the beauty of it. It's called housing stability. We want people to stay in their homes longer, number one. Number two is that landlords still can raise their rent every single year at whatever percentage the city deems appropriate, right? In Hayward, we also had 9 mobile home parks, right? And to think that the Bay Area doesn't have mobile home parks, right, is, clearly not accurate, right? So if the city of Hayward has 9, and my district has roughly 8 or 9 cities, if you really think about it, we have plenty of mobile home parks, right? And yes, they're behind trees and they have fences and so forth, and they're, these communities that you don't really see. It is not fair for mobile home park residents to pay off their home, right, and still have the land increase year over year over year over year without a real regulated rate, right? And, I am the only person. We were at a fundraiser this past, I want to say 2 weeks ago on a Friday, that Senator McGuire put forward. And we're trying to fundraise. And what was funny was that the California Apartment Association makes sure that they do not donate anything to me. In fact, they spend millions of dollars against me, right? And it's not just them, it's the realtors, it's so much more, because the conversation about rents is the big conversation that needs to be had at the state level, right? It's the conversation that needs to be had at the local level. We can actually provide more affordable housing if we protect people from becoming homeless or having to move. And again, I really want to highlight this to every elected person in the room, as well as just regular folks that care about this issue. When you talk about rent control in particular, or rent stabilization or anything like that, you are helping a family not have to move from home to home to home to home to home every single year. And you think of the effects of what that means. That person who is moving every single year has to drive further and further for their job. Their kid may be moving school to school to school. You are not building community. You are destroying communities if you do not focus on stabilizing rents. That is my point, right? And at a certain point, a lot of people will say in 2019, there was a rent cap, statewide rent cap at 10%. People love to say that. My colleagues love to say that. The reality is that rent cap has a sunset, number one. And number two, 10% people that have union jobs do not get a 10% increase year over year. Even our police officers do not get a 5% increase year over year over year. How can they afford rents? And I have argued with the administration as well as my colleagues and much more when they talk about, gas tax or the gas rate is going up. Okay, that's like maybe an extra $20, maybe an extra whatever the case may be. But when you raise somebody's rent at 10%, that's an extra $200, $300, $400, $500, depending on what their rent is, right? And so it's not fair for the majority of people. And again, I introduced a rent control effort specifically. It failed very miserably on the Senate floor. And I brought it up even knowing that it's going to fail. And the reason why is because I wanted to highlight this. 15 people voted yes, 16 people voted no, and 9 people abstained, right? That's more than the majority that genuinely were like, right? Nearly 25% of the Senate didn't want to take a vote because they didn't want to be on record, right? On the number one issue that affects every single city and every resident, housing costs, right? And my reform to Costa-Hawkins was actually very reasonable. It was to allow cities, again, the authority to do so, but expand that as much as possible on a timeline, right? So I really just want to highlight that. I do believe that the mobile home parks need more support in regards to that, right? Again, these are our aging seniors. These are our lowest income individuals. We deserve to do the work that actually helps them, right? We should. I also want to say, even when we talk about HOAs, right? HOA fees are more than our car payments now, right? In a lot of communities, they're $500, they're $600. Makes me not want to purchase a condo or a townhome because I don't want to be stuck with an HOA that is more than my car note, right? Of like $350, right? So on housing, I think there's a lot to do. I'm now a new member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The reason why I wanted to be on Senate Judiciary is because all the rent issues go through Judiciary. So we are going to be continuing to work on that as much as possible. As much as people don't like the word, they need to be educated about what that really means.
Thank you so much. Mike Cerrone?
Hi, Senator. I have a question about the bill you introduced or reintroduced to put the transit agencies under MTC. It's kind of a seamless Bay Area type of bill. And as you know, Senator Becker tried to get something like that done a couple of years ago and met a lot of resistance. What's the status of that bill, and how do you hope to get that passed, in the face of so much opposition?
Definitely. Well, I will say it's not necessarily to be under MTC. And when we talk about consolidation, I'm not married to one giant umbrella of, like, let's say all of them consolidate to one. I'm also not necessarily married to all of them being under 5, right? The goal is to have a legitimate study that's independently done, not by one of the agencies and not by, groups that are afraid that, their positions are going to get cut, but a genuine study as to what are we doing. And I will tell you this, MTC has stated, oh, we have a blue ribbon task force. We have a statewide committee. I read those documents. I'm one of those people that, like, giant nerd, will spend the weekend reading everything, right? And none of those task force have the directive of actually focusing on San Francisco Bay Area transit consolidation. Not a single one of those task force. So that is misinformation that they are trying to provide, number one. Number two is, we know that leadership from MTC was trying to kill this bill when it was first introduced, right? I fought for it and had to reintroduce it in the full year just to have more conversation. And like I said, when I introduced this bill, there was no bill talking about Bay Area transit alone, right? Now we have 3 other bills, so a total of 4 bills in the legislature that is being talked about, right? And I'm not going to get everything my first go round at this, but trust me when I say that I fight tooth and nail for exactly what I think is important, right? And I have said this, and I've met with the transit agencies, and there are transit agencies that do believe that they should get, shrunken down, if you will. I want to highlight a couple of things. The 27 agencies have their own call centers. So if you are taking BART and a bus, you have to call each agency to understand if you're going to connect, if there's a cancellation, if there's a problem with your trip. You also see, all of the duplicative services, right? So we have a bus agency in Alameda County. We also have cities with their own agencies, right? The agencies are created not in uniformity. They are created either through a joint powers, through the city, through the county. They all absorb funds in a different way. There's a lot of problems there, right? And because of also tax measures and so forth, we also have to do a study of how are each of these models funded and how, in a constitutionally appropriate way, would these be able to be consolidated. It's not going to happen overnight. We didn't get 27 agencies overnight. We're not going to be able to consolidate overnight. But I think that there is a lot of conversation. We are working, I'm working with Senator Wiener in particular, who last year tried to introduce a toll increase. The toll increase, and I made it very clear, San Francisco does not represent the rest of the Bay Area, right? The toll increases affect the East Bay and the South Bay. It does not necessarily affect San Francisco alone, right? yet the majority of the money goes to San Francisco, right? So there is a lot of things there. I'm very happy to be at least a voice that's really advocating for our district and saying enough's enough. Like, we don't want to pay more and more for a system that doesn't work for us, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with that. And I'll keep you guys updated. It is a very important bill to me.
Right, thank you. Actually, I wanted to go to the online for Charlene Liu's been waiting for a little while.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, Senator Wahab, for speaking. I echo Gail's comment about being able to listen to you. And I've learned a lot from you about housing, children, medical insurance, and gun safety just now. So thank you. I'm also very supportive of the transit bill that you're currently working on and making the Bay Area more seamless in terms of transit. I highly support that. I am a bicycle pedestrian advisory commissioner in Sunnyvale, and I have a question about making our streets safe for pedestrians and for bicyclists. In particular, I was wondering whether you would be working, or if you have a interest in making at the California level, the state level, any bills that you have an idea for making it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. And there are a few issues at the state level that I think are very important. For example, there's a push to get a complete streets bill, statewide, that would then regulate how cities would build complete streets, or the requirement to build complete streets. And there's also a proposed cut by the governor of $200 million to the active transportation program in the state. And then, as you know, there are many California highways crisscrossing every city. So this active transportation issue is very much influenced by what happens at the state. And I'm curious to see what your views on what we can do at the state level. Thank you.
Definitely. Well, I will say we had a bill introduction deadline yesterday. So that's, I think this year is going to be hard to introduce any bill regarding complete streets. In the city of Hayward, we actually adopted a complete streets master plan too. So we actually pushed this in our local city. And to be honest with you, we have 3 colleges in the city of Hayward, and so it actually was very beneficial. It's beautified the area as well, because of course, when you make a bike path or better sidewalks, you are improving community livelihoodness, right, if you will. The governor has cut a significant amount of money in regards to a number of things, but for example, last year, transportation alone was cut by, I think, over several $1 million, right? And that was fought back against. And I do believe we need to make bigger and deeper investments in public transit, but smart investments. I'm not trying to pay extra for a system that's failing and no real good governance, if you will, hence the, transit consolidation effort. We are very much interested in protecting pedestrians. I think that there's a lot of people, especially in the Bay Area, that talk about scooters and this and that. And here's the reality. I always think about it as my father, who is a senior, right? And he's aging and he has mobility issues. Does he feel safe walking on the sidewalk? Does he feel safe, utilizing this tool or getting on this bus or waiting here on the corner? And he does not. The honest truth is we are not there yet. You take a lot of other cities and compare it to whether it's, I just came from a trip from Argentina or in Norway or anywhere. They're doing it better than us, right? And again, we are the 4th largest economy. We have to kind of invest in quality of life, and safe streets is very much a part of that. And there are cities that are opposed to it. There's a lot of drivers that are opposed to some of the changes. It basically means, cutting off a lane potentially. It means a lot of different things. So those are all different arguments that people make against this, but it is the right thing to do. We need to be able to have a better mobility across the spectrum of our residents. to feel safe and feel like they can walk to wherever they need to and be cleaner and safer as a whole. So I do support it. I don't think I can introduce a bill this year. I am very much interested in any of the budget conversation because that would be under my wheelhouse to some degree. Granted, we would have to make cuts this year. I'm just going to forewarn everybody if you guys hear anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Let's go one more online. We have got Councilmember Mellinger.
Thank you very much, Senator. 1 second here. So 2 things. The first, I'm sorry, I'm going to do the more of a comment than a question thing. Absolutely supportive of what you're doing with trying to reform the transit agencies. One concern I would like to raise is that it is hard enough for us to get transit resources in Sunnyvale dealing with VTA. If that goes up to a higher level of government, my concern is going to be how do, the smaller cities especially make sure that we're able to effectively advocate for service. So that's something, I'm just going to ask that you keep in your mind as you propose, as you follow this course. The other issue I wanted to raise is around HCD in the housing element process. Now, I have been very supportive over the years, as you all know, of tightening the regulations on housing elements because there have been too many cities for too long that have been playing fun and games with them and that have been using them to actually get out of building the housing they need to do. The problem we have faced in Sunnyvale this year is that, yes, we've passed these regulations, but the standards are sufficiently unclear that it feels like we're playing guess and check with HCD. And so they'll send us feedback, we'll do the feedback, then we get more feedback from them saying, yeah, actually now go do this too. And every time this happens, there is a 60-day cycle. And every day this happens, the penalties on us compound. I don't have a problem with strict standards. What I do have a problem with is when it feels like those standards aren't being made clear. I'm totally happy to do what needs to be done, but tell us what needs to be done. And so that's my question. Is there any room in the legislature in the coming year or 2, since I know there's a cycle, on maybe reforming the reform on housing elements so that cities have a better understanding of what's expected of them, and so that it is easier for us to meet these new standards?
Definitely. Number one, just to address your VTA question and smaller cities, I represent a handful of decent sized cities. However, the reason why I push back on the whole San Francisco argument and any type of thing is because San Francisco and Oakland tend to get all the attention, all the love, all the money, all the everything you want to say, right? So hence why I say San Francisco does not represent the rest of the Bay Area. It's almost like it's a little island. People in San Francisco stay in San Francisco. It's us who may shop there or work there or so forth that struggle. The reason why I advocate is because I know just that. So any type of changes that we're trying to make, we're trying to prioritize more expansion, not just focused on higher transit or higher density where people think that, oh, okay, it benefits this city or that. As far as HCD, and I just want to highlight this, the city of Hayward had obviously our own housing element. We worked with HCD. We have prioritized affordability significantly, where Gustavo, who is the HCD director, has come to our city more than once in just the past year because we have so many groundbreaking ceremonies for 100% affordable, right? And number one, we have to ask ourselves, is the city doing enough for affordability, right? Which should be prioritized by every single city over market rate housing. I also want to highlight that there is a conflict of interest for cities. They want to prioritize market rate and above market rate housing because they benefit from the taxes. The property taxes that are generated are a source of revenue for the cities. So hence why there is more of a focus on market rate or above market rate. That is just pure facts right there, right? As HCD, we have heard several cities complain about the process for working with HCD and so forth. Our staff, including myself at times, but our district director meets with every single city manager at least once a month, right? And there are some cities that have had an easy process and some cities that have struggled. What we have offered to a lot of folks is that we can be a liaison to HCD, see
Oh,
what the status update is and so forth. I know that Sunnyvale has had their housing element rejected after the initial acceptance, right? And the 60-day period is largely for, you know, any improvements and so forth. We are happy to talk about specific situations and what is the concerns with the staff that actually really take care of that. But because we do have a decent relationship with HCD, we do want to also try to see how we can kind of smooth out whatever problems there are, or be a little bit more transparent and have them, you know, really explain what's going on. So that is something that we are willing to do. And, you know, I know staff has been told that as well.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. I want to go back to the room. We've got Eileen Lee.
Hi, my name is Eileen Lay, Sunnyvale School District, speaking on my own behalf. I feel like I should add speaking on my own behalf as my second last name. You mentioned that California is the fourth largest economy, and our education funding is just not there, not the fourth largest education funding. It's complicated. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of the areas I'm curious about is your thoughts about regional cost indexing for the local control funding formula. Sunnyvale is lucky enough that we are a basic aid district. We're community funded. A lot of our neighbors are not. A lot of the other cities within your region are not. And we are also lucky that we have very generous voters who are theoretically in about a month going to help us pass Measure 3 for modernizing our schools. But again, we are fortunate to have that, and a lot of other schools do not. There's such a complicated process for all this, for trying to get our teachers paid enough. Our teachers are some of the best paid in the area, and yet some of our starting teachers still qualify for low-income housing. We do the best we can, but unfortunately, the best we can isn't good enough for them. And I feel so bad about that. What are your thoughts about education reform, about the LCFF, about regional cost indexing, those things? I realize this is a big ask, but you seem to have a lot of really great ideas, and I just really want to hear from you.
Definitely. You know, so I have never served on school board. So I will just preface that I am not a parent either, right? So the only schooling that I really, truly understand is that of being a student, right? However, we have a lot of colleagues that I will say we work the most, and we kind of refer back to school board trustee Diane Jones of Fremont, who has a wealth of knowledge on kind of this, and she spends time with me to educate me a little bit on what is going on. The reality is we do need to invest more in our school systems, right? In fact, I was with our superintendent in Hayward earlier today, and he was talking about another measure that they're running for, you know, obviously funding. We also have, and I just want to highlight this, the School of the Deaf and the School of the Blind in Fremont. And these schools are special schools in the sense that they are governed by the state of California. And the School of the Deaf, and I want to tell everybody here, is older than the state of California, right? So really think about that for a second, right? And they are not paid even the equivalent of what teachers and staff make at Fremont, right? And so there's a lot of disparity in our schooling systems, right? I spoke to Diane. Diane had actually a very interesting idea about being able to pass parcel tax, you know, that 55% threshold versus a real true tax of like, you know, 2/3 and so forth. And we want to be able to see if we can kind of allow for local districts to be able to pass certain efforts with a lower threshold if it's purely for education. And I think the majority of voters actually would support that, right? The reality is also, I know that the governor and the first partner have really invested in our school systems and really tried to prioritize our youth and school-aged kids and so forth, but it's not enough, right? We know that we're still struggling. This is an issue that I think many of my colleagues, we have a colleague or two that are former teachers that really care about this issue and much more. We are not going to get out of it overnight. And I'm actually very worried about our funding models moving forward, to be completely frank. I do not sit on the budget subcommittee that covers education. But I have a colleague that does, and we do often have conversations, and we are going to prioritize this. If this is like, things that, we can have conversations with you all about it, I do want you guys to reach out to our staff too, because like I said, this is not an issue that I'm like a subject matter expert in. But I do want to highlight one of the bills that I'm carrying this cycle is to actually help improve the pay in regards to the people that work at the School of the Deaf and the Blind, right? So the bill will go out of the collective bargaining typical standards, if you will, but it's because some of these people, and these are our teachers, right, in a community that is the most vulnerable. I don't know who's more vulnerable than our deaf and blind students and teachers in community, and they provide a home in some capacity to our entire state. Anybody that is deaf and blind is referred to those schools and should be referred to those schools because it is a community. This bill, I was asked to not cross the bill, meaning not introduce the bill. And I was working on it since fall, right? And again, it's in my district. And I got so upset at, some of the groups that were asking me not to carry this bill because, it sets a precedence and this and that and so forth and so forth. And I said, I don't know who's more vulnerable. Right. I don't know why we would be taking these seats up if we're not going to work for the most vulnerable community members. And so we have introduced this bill. I'm very proud of it. It is one step in the right direction, but it does not solve the issues in your district or in the Fremont area or San Jose or in California anywhere, right? These are for just the special schools. But as I, continue to sit in the seat, I want to know more about it and be able to do more in education. Even in my last event, I speak about education a lot in the sense that you should be, focused on learning from cradle to grave. It's not just about the degree. It's not just about anything like that. So I hope that you reach out so we can have a deeper conversation on this as well.
Thank you for your thoughts. That was helpful and meaningful. My husband is visually impaired as well.
All right, thanks. Let's go back to the Zoom hands. We have Tim Wee.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Wahab, for being here. I hopefully have two simple questions. One, do you ride a bike for transportation? And what is your position on the California Safety Stop Bill, otherwise known as Stop as Yield for bicyclists?
I'm not 100% sure of that particular bill, to be completely frank. And, I think over 2,000 bills are introduced just this year. So we need some time to go over bills with staff and so forth. So I can't comment on the bill at all. The next piece is I used to ride a bike often, to be completely frank with you. I do not as much anymore. I live maybe about 2 blocks away from the Capitol. So sometimes I'll walk, sometimes I'll drive myself, depends on the day and when we're meeting and so forth, or the weather condition. But biking is actually something I actually do enjoy, especially if it's flat cities. Sacramento is very much a flat city.
Yes, Sacramento is very flat, great for biking. And
Yes.
look into the Safety Stop Bill. It's coming up 4 times now. I think it's maybe a 2-year bill now or something. I forget it. It's still in the pot there. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Next is Margaret Okazumi.
Hi, Senator Wahab. Thank you for joining us today. I have a couple of comments based on what you've talked about so far, and I'm really interested in the public transit bill. And I'm wondering if there's a particular staffer I should talk with about it.
For the most part, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, that was just one question I had. And then I also had a comment about, there has been a bill that's a spot bill that's being used for to overturn the provision around the utility tax. And I think I understand there's something underway for rooftop solar. And I just wanted to highlight the importance of rooftop solar and conservation and renewable energy and helping to make housing more affordable for people because my husband and I were able to make our house very energy efficient and install rooftop solar, although we're on a low fixed income now, even with the huge rate increases for electricity and gas and so forth, we've been all right. And it really pains me to see other people being denied this opportunity to just like lower their utility costs, because I know it definitely impacts housing affordability. And and my second question that I have, in addition to like who I talk to give input about the public transit governance, and I've put a lot of thought into it in the past. I was just wondering about, for social housing, what are some next steps for this? I know there's kind of a long timeline for the carrying out of SB 555, but what are some other things that are in the works related to financing or helping to make this to happen?
Definitely. So number one, you should definitely reach out to Grace Deco. But Margaret, I think you also have our contact information from Nergis, who is my district director, as well as pretty much anybody on our staff. I do believe Elliot on our staff is the one who's probably going to be taking over transportation. We have not assigned committees just yet. But for the most part, Grace, as our capital director, will definitely help with that. So that's one piece of it. The second piece about solar and alternative fuels and so forth, I do actually have a bill regarding alternative fuels. I wanted to run it last year, still getting my feet wet, if you will. So this year we have a bill regarding alternative fuels infrastructure. So honestly, I get frustrated with extremist talk, right? And so, for example, I believe, because we do have gas stations all over the place, right? That is our infrastructure as we stand right now. I drive a hybrid in particular, and I live in an apartment. I cannot charge my vehicle. People who live in apartments cannot charge their vehicle. Let's be honest. And if the landlord installs or property manager installs one or two charging stations, it's usually already taken up, right? And so for a person like myself, or a working person, how can I charge a vehicle? How can I purchase a vehicle that is all electric? And I just want to be very clear. Ford already announced that they're going to stop making their all electric Ford F-150 pickup truck. Hertz also sold off their 22,000 electric vehicles because it is hard for the average person to utilize and even rent and charge up. And so there is a lot of problems there. And so I introduced this particular bill that would be creating a task force of environmentalists and business owners and so forth to really talk about what we're doing about alternative fuels, not rhetoric, not extremist talk, not anything like that, but with the goal of putting EV charging stations and hydrogen fueling stations in our current gas stations. All right. We already have the infrastructure. Let's expand. All right. And slowly move away from fossil fuels and much more. So, there have been some folks that have asked me remove hydrogen completely, because there's 3 versions of hydrogen. One is brown, blue, and green, meaning the best. And brown being supposedly a little bit more dirtier. And I will also say that's even highly debatable amongst a lot of other groups. And I said, I'm not going to bet on technology. I want to have the conversation about the actual infrastructure already. And who knows, in 5 years, there may be a different type of technology that's going to be utilized. So I do believe that's important. I was thinking of introducing a bill. We have had so many problems with PG&E. PG&E is poorly run. PG&E also spent a significant amount of money against me as well when I was running. And we know why. And the situation is that we have created something called Golden State Energy, right? And Golden State Energy is basically for the California government to take over PG&E, its assets, and much more, and run it. And there's pros and cons to it. How many of you guys really enjoy the interaction you guys have at the DMV? Right? A lot of improvements can be made when it's, government operated per se. But at the same time, PG&E has not done what they need to do. They have not put their power lines underground. If you actually take a look and do some research, I think they have a very flimsy number of how many miles they've undergrounded, right? And it's disappointing to see. When we talk about solar and much more and some of the rate increases, and you know, the bill that you referenced was is being introduced by people who actually voted for that increase. And the reason for the increase was to say, hey, we're going to do better, we're going to do more, and they have not. And we see flooding, and we see in the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, right, have spots that did not have power for 48 hours, right? At a certain point, we're going to have to talk about what is our infrastructure. If we're the fourth largest economy, what are we doing? And so the reason why I really care about infrastructure is because of that. Like, if we are going to say we compete in the world as the fourth largest independent economy, right? Why aren't we able to compete with other places, right? When we're talking about transit, when we're talking about safety, when we're talking about electricity, when we're talking about Wi-Fi and fiber optics and much more. So infrastructure means so much to me as to why are we not making the proper investments. And that is holding these organizations accountable. It is also doing a significant amount of reform. It's also trying to do something completely new, right? With all of those things said, there's a significant amount of pushback and blowback as an elected official trying to do these things all at once. So we are chipping away at the problem. And I do agree with you that solar and just, you know, having clean energy and, you know, supporting the grid, I do believe that it's also, the grid should also support the local area in case of an emergency and much more. So I've actually thought about this a lot and also talked about it even on Hayward City Council. So this is actually a big interest area for me.
All right, thank you. We do have Stephen Meyer. Next.
Hello, Senator. My name is Steve Meyer, and I'd like to follow up regarding transportation infrastructure. So I've had the opportunity to travel in Japan and Europe, and the Shinkansen is just a dream. And Sunnyvale has been working hard on two grade separation projects. There's one on Mary and Evelyn, and then there's another at Sunnyvale in downtown. So these projects are, you know, getting planned and proposed, and they're going to need funding. So I just wonder if you have any comments about accelerating high-speed rail, accelerating Caltrain electrification, bringing Caltrain further down to areas in Pajaro and you know, Monterey County. Rail is fantastic. I'm a big fan of rail. And I just wonder if you have any comments on that. Thank you.
Definitely. So I have actually shared this with a few folks. When I talk about the transit consolidation, the reason why I talk about it is because every single of these agencies are pulling from funds, both at the federal level as well as the state level. And you do not see the benefit necessarily for people like ourselves, right? So when I was a Hayward City Council member, and I still live in Hayward, and I would commute to San Jose for my day job, right? And BART wouldn't go as deep as I need to go into San Jose. And to be honest with you, we were very close to the county supervisor's office and so forth. And BART doesn't go that far, right? As much as we are, you know, so excited about one extra extension or one extra stop and so forth, that should have been done 20 years ago. Right. Let's be honest about this, right? Since I was a kid, we've talked about high-speed rail, right? And we still have not seen that fully formed yet, right? And at a certain point, and I'm a very impatient human being, and people, my colleagues all know that at this point, right? It is why not? And it always comes down to money and territory and these little kingdoms that people want to protect. And I don't care about any of that. What I care about is, okay, is this doing the job for the regular people? And it's not. And I have stated to these agencies, MTC included, as well as all of these transit agencies, that our system should go in a more regional direction in the sense of all of the Bay Area, 9 Bay Area counties, right? Number one. Number two, we should be able to get to Lake Tahoe we should also be able to get to Monterey County. That is what our public transit setup should be. So when we want to take a vacation on a weekend, right, we should hop on a train. We should hop on anything that we can to get to our location within an hour or two max, right? So the framework of what my consolidation plan is to focus on the technology, right? The speed, the cost to an end user, as well as the safety, right? And so I think that that's really important, to have a real vision for what does 21st century technology allow us to do for 21st century transportation. And you've traveled around, I've traveled around, and honestly, nobody can say that, oh, Bay Area Transit is amazing. Not a single person. We do not compete with Oregon. We cannot compete with Washington, D.C. We can't compete with New York City. And we're the Silicon Valley, right? So it's disappointing. And, you know, a lot of people who are opposed to my transit bill, and I'm going to be very honest with you, even some of the electeds in the Bay Area are opposed for a number of reasons. Number one, because I brought it up and they didn't bring it up. Okay, I hate to say it, but that's the honest truth, right? There is a lot of ego in politics. Number two, because they feel scared of these different agencies and different electeds that are opposed to their seat potentially being questioned right now, right? Number three, MTC in particular, you know, I've said it, is unable to direct a lot of this effort, right? As much as they're supposed to oversee and control the money, the fact that everyone points to this Clipper card as a uniformity, right, for the end user, that only happened because a state bill pushed it, that you guys have to have it. And so that's still lipstick on a pig, right? When we can't actually in one sitting or one ticket be able to go all the way without thinking about it, right? And so I do believe in the expansion of public transit. I do believe that when we're talking about pedestrian safety and bikeways and much more, it all is dependent on public transit, right? The more public transit we have, the further and deeper it goes into our communities, the better it is for all people. And MTC will say, oh, well, you know, a country like Switzerland has like 250 public transit agencies. Yes, but they fully invest in public transit. They don't necessarily support the car as much as we do here, right? So there's a lot of arguments to have, a lot of misinformation, a lot of petty politics, to be completely frank with you, because who of the 27 agencies are going to say, okay, I think that we're a little redundant, we're not necessarily needed. And again, it's a money grab for a lot of the localities, because they are grabbing funds from public transit, and hence why public transit dollars have to keep growing, because of the fact that we can't sustain what we have, right? And they will talk about ridership is at the levels of pre-COVID. Well, guess what? Prior to COVID, ridership was going down, and that was the trend for the last 10 years. So great that it's pre-COVID. It's still not where it needs to be. None of us drive because, you know, we enjoy driving and being stuck on 880 or, you know, 680 or any of the, you know, freeways. We drive because it's still faster and easier than public transit. That's the honest truth of it, right? So that's my take on that effort.
Thank you.
All right, that's great. Senator Wahab, you've been so generous with your time, and thank you so much for taking all of our questions. I did want to circle back to one of Margaret Okazumi's questions, because I didn't hear the answer. So about the social housing bill and how that gets implemented, and kind of the timeline and what happens next with that.
Definitely. So the bill is supposed to have HCD study exactly how we can pursue public social housing, I should say. And with that, the report should come with its findings by 2026, the end of 2026. So it will take a little bit of time. And at the same time, I do think that there's a couple of things that we have to do. One, we have to actually have local cities willing to potentially pilot this effort. I also want to highlight that Bay Area cities, the majority of what we do develop is infill development, right? We're no longer having acres and acres of land. We have to actually build upwards. We also have to prioritize a mixed income housing, not just here where all the $1 million homes are, here or where all the poor people are going to live. That is destroying communities in itself as well. Every single city should try to either, say that we are willing to test pilot this social housing effort here in this direction, identify locations themselves, work with HCD and say, hey, I'm willing to do this, right? And that's through our local city councils as well as potential resolutions to make that public commitment, as well as through our central committees. So I think that that's a big step forward. And then as funding, we actually have a lot of housing funding, but a lot of cities don't actually prioritize. And I'm as a city council member and working with colleagues and so forth, housing and homelessness are the number one issues in every single city survey across the Bay Area. Number one issue for every resident. Yet affordability, rent control, social housing, and many of these efforts that could potentially help are not prioritized. So holding your city council members accountable is incredibly important. And these public efforts in regards to a resolution, a letter of support, a letter to HCD saying, I would like to be one of the first cities that test pilot this. San Francisco is currently right now doing it. I think there was people reaching out saying that we want to be the first to test pilot it. So as much as we can, just organizing again, right? That's the number one thing, but it's going to take about roughly 2 years before we get anything substantial back, maybe sooner, but being able to have the communication with HCD is incredibly important.
Great. Thanks so much. All right.
Wait,
well,
I'm sorry. For cities to show support, would that be like offering land for it, or how would they?
It's a number of things. One, it could be a resolution is always important because with resolutions, you are able to talk about social housing in a public way and make that public commitment, number one. Number two is that, our city council members, each of them individually, not necessarily even from the whole city, can write a letter to HCD and say that we would love to participate or so forth. Developers can also engage in this model and identify a piece of land that they would be willing to work with the city and develop some social housing effort. But social housing is more than just brand new development. It is also in regards to protecting current housing efforts that are naturally affordable. So in the city of Hayward, we had a lot of different efforts in regards to transitioning hotels and motels that are no longer utilized, but having them, retrofitted into affordable housing. So there's a lot of effort around there. There needs to be a big push around light tech funding, which is also administered through the treasurer's office, that a lot of people are using to support currently affordable housing and maintain that. We also need more deed restricted housing, right? And to say that, hey, in perpetuity, right, that this housing will never be for market rate housing. So new developments can kind of go into that model. There's a number of different ways to prioritize social housing. And that's the beauty of social housing, is that as much as possible, we want to continue moving this forward and finding naturally affordable housing, as well as making more affordable housing.
all right. Great answers. And again, thank you so much for speaking to the club and answering our questions. And I hope you get those waivers for allowing you to introduce more bills.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, guys. I
That's
really do
amazing.
appreciate your time, and I'm always happy to come back and answer any questions you guys may have.
All right. And last thing, there's an open invitation to come to Sunnyvale, and we'll give you tours of the couple of largest mobile home parks in the state.
Yes, 100%. I'd love to do that.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Okay, I'll let you introduce him in just a second. Okay, the second thing on our agenda is actually hearing from endorsed candidates on any updates. However, we don't have any endorsed candidates here in the room or on Zoom. If there's anyone that wants to speak on behalf of an endorsed candidate, you can raise your hand. I know there are some meet and greets happening this weekend. If anybody wants to announce those or not. If not, then we'll move on. Yes, Tim.
Yeah, so Tara Krieshnan is having a meet and greet at Cup and Cone on Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock in Sunnyvale on Mary and Fremont corner.
Right, cool. Anyone else? Okay. All right, let's move on to the next item we have, which is, oh, Patrick is online. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I didn't see you there. Go ahead, Patrick.
Well, hello everyone. Patrick Ahrens here. I'm just in between my own meet and greets at the moment. Just finished one in Santa Clara, and now I'm heading to Cupertino to do my next meet and greet with my former political science professor at De Anza, who's opened up her home. Campaign is going really well. I've been knocking on doors in the rain in my umbrella here, and I'll definitely send the club the last couple of meet and greets I have for the couple of weeks that we have left. Would love for you all to join me. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Okay, and our last item on our agenda is about the status of our redistricting at the Fremont Union High School District. And I'm going to let Peggy do the introductions, and I will pass the mic and the chair, the fireside chair.
Hey, everybody. We have the Community Trustee Area Districting Committee here, and this is Doug Kunz. He is the chairperson and a member of the club. And fill us in. What's going on? Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. And yeah, I'm one member of 13 adult members and 3 student members on the Community Trustee Area Districting Committee for the Fremont Union High School District. So I understand that you guys have already had a couple of presentations on this topic, so I won't go through all the basics. And Crystal asked me to switch on expert mode, so I'll see what I can do. Let's see, I did put together some slides. So it was the Google. Yep, there we go. Yeah, can we go back to the start of the deck? This is about kind of in the middle of it. There we go. And it helps if I don't block the projector. All right. So hopefully everybody's already aware of the fact that the high school district is transitioning to trustee area elections and what that means. So that, quick recap, 50-cent version is that just like with local congressional districts or local assembly districts or local city council districts, the high school district is transitioning to having trustee areas where you have a local area represented by somebody who must live in that area. That's the real quick whirlwind version of it. Next slide, please. All right, so today going to go over a few things. One is just an update in terms of where we are with the process and how that's going. Also wanted to highlight how Dem Club members can participate and support. And then also put some potential map options up there just to kind of bounce them off the group and see what kind of feedback we can get about them. Next slide, please. All right, so I apologize for the eye chart here, but I got to get closer so I can read it. Hopefully it's better online. So there's a few things that are going on. All right, so right now we are here, and that says community engagement. So the committee, we've been asked by the high school district both to educate the community about the change and also to gather and synthesize input about that change. And so that's what we are in the process of doing right now. Our next meeting is going to be on March 11th. And at that point, basically, the committee is going to try and get to having focus maps that provide some food for thought for the board to consider. At the board meeting on, I'm going to say that's March 20th. Sorry about the pixelated graphic. Going to be presenting some of those initial focus maps to the board. So this is a chance to have a conversation with the board, say, here's what we're hearing from the community. Here are some options of what that might look like. See what initial feedback the board might have, but not yet making our final recommendation. Then finally, at the April, I believe that's 8th committee meeting, our early April committee meeting, the committee will come to our final recommendation in terms of what the recommended map or set of maps are for the board to consider in their final decision, and also a recommendation about the sequencing. So meaning which 2 seats should be up in 2024 and which 3 seats should be up in 2026. And of course, that's tied to the actual maps themselves. Basically, District 1 or Trustee Area 1 means a different thing depending on which maps you're talking about. All right. And then finally, at the, I believe that's April 24th board meeting, the board will hopefully do their final adoption of a trustee area map. And then we're off to the races in terms of having those maps progress through approval processes at the county level, and then ultimately go into effect for the November election. So that's, a roadmap of where we are in terms of timeline. And right now, I'll give updates in terms of, qualitatively how I think it's going in terms of outreach and what I'm hearing. So other members of the committee and I have been trying to reach out through a lot of different means. Like in my case, I'm an officer on the Council of PTAs. And so over the last month, I've been to just a large number of PTA meetings. It's a neat little window onto each little school community, and at this point I've been to PTA meetings in Los Altos, Cupertino, Saratoga, Sunnyvale, San Jose, and if I can only get Eisenhower Elementary in Santa Clara to respond to my email and speak to them, then I'll have run the table and collected the whole set of each city in the Fremont Union High School District. Other members have gone out to Rotary. I spoke at the Sunnyvale Neighborhood Association's meeting. There have been community meetings at a couple of the high schools, so specifically at Lynbrook and Monte Vista. So the committee as a whole, we're doing our best to tap into our networks, reach out in various ways through our different connections, and we are selected from throughout the district. So we have an array of different, kind of windows onto the communities, and try and hear what the community is thinking. Qualitatively, what I'm seeing and hearing is, I'd call it sort of a 2-part conversation. Here in the north part of the high school district, I think that the conversation is further along. I think that we benefit from the fact that Sunnyvale already transitioned to, not trustee area, but council district elections for our city council, and the Sunnyvale School District, already transitioned to trustee area elections for the Board of Education in Sunnyvale School District. So up here, there's less of a conversation about what the change is, or is this a good idea, and it's more, let's talk about where the line should be drawn, and we'll get to that in a bit. In the southern part of the district, frankly, this is a newer idea. And so I think that there's more education that's been needed. And also, frankly, I think that because the high school district is really the first local agency in that area to contemplate going through or to proceed with going through this change, there's more, I'll say, of a fear factor. Some of that is just, kind of human nature and risk aversion. Some of it, I think, stems from there are a couple of elementary schools that were closed a couple of years ago by the Cupertino Union School District. And so, that kind of natural, something's changing, and I've recently been through something that I didn't enjoy with the elementary schools has sometimes led to a dynamic with parents in the southern part of the school district that it involves. Is this going to make that more of an issue here? And I think that the district staff has really done a good job of preparing factual responses to that in terms of how enrollment projections look for the high school district, investments that have been made in schools at that end of the district, and active steps that are being taken to stabilize enrollment across the different high schools. For example, transferring students from Cupertino to Lynbrook, and also transferring students from the Homestead attendance pool to Monte Vista. So, hats off to district staff. That's something that has been a parallel conversation to the conversation about districting for the high school district, but it's I think been a necessary one for district staff to take on. It's outside of my committee's mandate, but addressing those kinds of questions and conversations has been necessary to try and hopefully get people past should this change happen or not, to more like, well, this change is happening. The board's already taken the vote. So let's have a conversation about how to make it work best for you and your community in terms of how the line should be drawn. So that's, qualitatively, how I would describe, what's been going on. I was at an event at Lynbrook High School where I got a lot of feedback that was I'll say not based on well, it was more coming from a place of fear. So I want to show compassion for that. But it was not conducive to the conversation about school boundaries. At the same time, I've also been, just this past week, I gave a presentation at Blue Hills Elementary School in Saratoga, which is a bunch of future Lynbrook parents. And afterwards, somebody said, I didn't realize that nobody from Saratoga had ever, been on the school board since 1970, in the years that we have data. And I like having, something that makes it so that it's likelier that we'll have, some direct representation. And just on Thursday night, I was at Kennedy Middle School within a mile of Monte Vista High School. And in that case, again, I just didn't really get any questions or concerns. It was mainly kind of, okay, makes sense, kind of a response from that particular audience. So, one of my takeaways is, when I think about how the conversations have gone in the southern parts of the district, sometimes there have been, I'll say a very vocal contingent, but it's not clear to me that one should regard them as being representative necessarily. And so I've been trying to make a point of reaching other audiences also in the southern part of the school district, just to see what other reactions are out there and see what we can find out. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of what members of the Dem Club can do, I think the first thing is just simply to be aware of the process, and to the degree that you're able to support it, please do so. So here we have, this is from our outreach deck. The trustee area page on the district website is a great resource. It has a wealth of information about the process and how we're going about it. If you already have opinions that you want to share, or if you have questions that you want to ask, we have an email inbox that you can send to, and that goes to district staff and then is ultimately going to the committee. So again, that's the same inbox there. There is an online survey that's posted up, but what I would really want to highlight is attending a CTAD committee meeting, and I'd also say attending a board meeting and providing public comment. So to the degree that we can learn about, how people are viewing their neighborhoods and how they want to see the lines be drawn. That's exactly the kind of public comment that I think is helpful for the committee. And if you're providing public comment to the board, I would just say, make a point of expressing your support for the process. There have been, I mentioned, some very vocal voices from the south of the district. I don't know how representative they are necessarily, but they have made a point of making a lot of comments at the board meetings, speaking against the process. And so to the degree that you support the process and want to make sure that it continues and that we have it in place for the 2024 elections, show up to the board meeting and voice that opinion. Make the board know, make sure that the board hears voices in support of this change, as well as some of the other voices that they've been hearing. Last up, just in terms of really going for expert mode, you can make and submit your own map. And actually, I've seen, as we think about how to draw trustee area boundaries. Our trustee area is just not something that rolls off the tongue. As we think about how to draw trustee area boundaries for Sunnyvale, one thing that I've seen is actually that maps that have come in from the community have helped to move that conversation forward. So even if it's not something that necessarily everybody wants to roll up their sleeves and draw maps. For the people who have taken it on themselves to learn the software and submit something and explain what their point of view is that they're trying to accomplish, those have been really helpful. So making your own map is definitely an option as well, and I really applaud the board and the district staff for making this mapping software available to the public. Next slide, please. All right, so I already spoke about a couple of ways that Dem Club members can support. So again, write or give public comment to the board in favor of the process. Next, I would encourage you to reach out. I think we're dealing with an expert audience here, but you probably have friends who are less informed about this change. So reaching out to your friends, your networks, and making sure that other people are also aware and supportive is definitely a step that you can take. Last up, like I said, participate in the mapping process, whether it's submitting a map, giving public comment, the voices that we hear, after a while, we do tend to hear themes and patterns, and that is the kind of stuff that allows us to make informed choices and recommendations. Next slide, please. All right, so who wants to see some maps? All right. Woo! All right. So I've broken this up into two different sections. So the first is going to be basically Central and North Sunnyvale, more or less because of the way population works. There are going to be two districts in Central and North Sunnyvale, and so then the question is how those should be drawn. And then there's a separate question, which is for the southern part of Sunnyvale, kind of how south of Fremont Avenue should those of us who live there get paired up with different parts of Cupertino, Los Altos, what have you. All right, so and I'll apologize in advance if these are a little hard to see, but let's see what we can do. All right, next slide, please. So first we're going to talk about North and Central Sunnyvale. Next slide. So we're going to step through several maps here. And I'll go ahead and try and provide the color commentary in terms of where streets are. So anytime that you see it say FUHSD scenario map, this was produced by the district's demographer, contracted demographer, and has been reviewed by the demographer and the lawyer. So this is something that passes all the legal requirements. Whenever I show you a community map, this is one that might be illustrative, but if it hasn't been through the full vetting process yet, is not one that I can commit to saying, yes, this is one that could definitely go into effect. But it's still worth discussing, what the ideas are that underpin those maps. So the first scenario map from the school district basically, divided Sunnyvale into like a northern and southern portion. So the dividing line here is basically Evelyn Avenue up through Matilda, and then basically the train tracks. So one of the things that, a few things that we've heard about this particular map. First off, that for people in the north of the city, that transportation to either Homestead or Fremont is really a paramount concern. And so what people tended to like about this map was that it grouped together the north of the city. And had voters all in one district for whom transportation issues are a concern. Let's see, the other thing that we keep an eye on, well, we keep an eye on a lot, but another salient fact about this particular map is that this district has a Hispanic Latino voting age population, citizen voting age population of about 26%. And as we look at the different maps in terms of North Sunnyvale, I'll just call out what those percentages are. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next three scenario maps from the high school district all were identical with respect to Central and North Sunnyvale. So I just consolidated them onto one slide. So the goal of this map was to maximize Hispanic and Latino representation. And for this district here in magenta, the percentage of the citizen voting age population that is Hispanic or Latino, according to the census, is about 28%. And that was the highest the demographer could get it in a legally valid district. One thing that you'll note is that, the district in green starts at Fremont Avenue, goes all the way around up north of 101 and doesn't include, the green district includes Tasman Crossing, so the North Sunnyvale district in fact does not. So again, the chief goal of this particular map is to maximize Hispanic Latino representation, but it does come at the trade-off of considering Northern Sunnyvale specific issues and transportation issues. Next slide, please. Okay, so with just, Gail. Yeah, actually, if I can get through. Okay. So, qualitatively, with just those two maps in the mix, what I and other committee members tended to hear was, well, neither of these quite feel right. Is there some kind of middle ground? So one member of the community took a crack at that and submitted this map. In this case, what she was aiming to do was to base it off of the dividing line, between the northern and central Sunnyvale district off of school district boundary or middle school attendance boundaries from the Sunnyvale school district. She viewed these as being, really relevant communities in terms of how people experience and live in the city. So in this case, the boundary line runs along Maud Avenue, down Matilda, and then over, just north of Ellis School, on Iowa Avenue, jogs on Sunnyvale Avenue, and then continues over on McKinley. So in this case, it preserves more of that sense of a north-south division. Division's probably not the best word. And it also hits a middle ground in terms of Hispanic Latino representation. So it's not at that 28% level, but this one is at 27.7%. So still higher than what we saw in the first map from the high school district. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is another community submitted map. And this one, instead of using middle school attendance boundaries, used measure roadways. So in this case, it's a lot further north. So it uses Central Expressway, Matilda, and then Evelyn Avenue. The northern Sunnyvale district in this case has a 27.4% Hispanic Latino representation. So again, higher than that first scenario map from the high school district, but more preserving, Hispanic Latino, more preserving North Sunnyvale, distinct district. All right, so that's it for North and Central Sunnyvale maps. So I think let me pause and give folks a chance to give input or ask questions here before we go to the southern part of the district.
So just a little parallel example. When we made our maps in the Sunnyvale district, one of the things that I proposed at the beginning was trying to have as much representation for each school as possible. In our case, was about that. So making the maps in a way that, well, with two exceptions that were impossible because they were in a corner, we could say that this particular school at least have 3 or 4 people rolling for it. They have commitment, they have vetted, because even if it's just a little smidge of that, those are their voters. They make sure that that school is going to do their best. That was kind of the concept behind that. So, in a way, I think that if we want representation for Sunnyvale, we should try to have one that has as many voters, as many representatives in the city. If we can have, I mean, even if it's a smidge in the top, if we can say that for our Sunnyvalians, or in a scenario it can happen, that would be awesome. But also, I see the part about Northern Sunnyvale. Even though I like that it's going to have one strong representative inside that area because it's just that area, it also kept me thinking that maybe the options when you have 2 people invested in the north of Sunnyvale, because you have a cut that is more vertical, that makes a stronger answer for that community, because you have 2 people that are going to be advocating for the people inside that area instead of one. Once, yes, it's true that if you have only one stock north of the 101 or north of the other street you were using, that person is going to be fully committed, but still it's only 1 vote out of 5. Just an idea.
Thank you. And I'll ask for help from Peggy and Crystal, just in terms of keeping me honest for addressing folks in the room and online. So,
Yeah, Doug, it's Gail.
Yeah.
Over here. I just wanted to point out that the first map that you showed keeps all the mobile home parks together that are in the north part of the city. And the second map does not. And that's a community of interest that you can think about as keeping together. Okay. And I think there's 8 mobile home parks in the north part. I could be wrong on that, but there's a lot. And that is a community of interest that you could consider keeping together. Thank you.
Makes sense.
Doug, what does not fully vetted mean? Is this, do these at least come close to meeting the population?
So they meet population balance, but they haven't, been looked at by the demographer and the lawyer yet and been told, yes, this could potentially be adopted. So let's try to put that disclaimer on. We have a question in the front here.
Wait a second.
What is this big space up on the upper right hand corner? The gray spot.
You ever been to the mystery spot in Santa Cruz? If memory serves, that tracks to the Santa Clara Unified School District. I'm curious to know the history of how that came about, but yeah. Any other questions or input in the room or online?
Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead, Charlene.
Yeah, thanks, Doug, for presenting that. So in the map scenario 1 and then the 2 through 4, which you're showing up right now, I was wondering what is the rationale for having that southwestern side kind of be in a different color from the green? You know, it's a kind of a brown color. And in scenario 1, I think that area was drawn a little differently. Yeah, there. So is that going from Remington South and
Yeah, so
Mary Avenue?
On these maps, so I've been speaking to the two districts that we're going to have in the central and north of Sunnyvale, and this is Fremont Avenue here, and here we're starting to talk about trustee areas that would be south of Fremont Avenue. So that's why you're seeing some other colors there, and I haven't spoken to district being south of Fremont Avenue at this point.
Right. Okay. Because that area is also part of Sunnyvale. Were you going to talk about that little, why it's?
Yeah, we sure are.
Okay, thanks.
So just to reflect back, I've definitely heard two schools of thought. One along the lines of what Isabel voiced, that it would be good to have two people who have a stake in representing the north of Sunnyvale, and then the other school of thought that I've heard is effectively, well, in that case you're likely to have two people who live from the southern ends of those two districts and might not be too conversant with issues in the north. So I think what it gets down to is perhaps a representation versus what somebody's command of local issues are and how top of mind it's going to be for them. All right.
Let me just. Hey, Tim, online, can you go back to the map, the community drawn map, please?
There's two community.
Option 3, community,
so
the one that
slide.
Jesse directly did. Yeah. So what I wanted to point out about this, I know there's still this notch that Charlene's talking about, and I think that's in the Cherry Chase attendance area.
Yeah, this is
this
like
little,
Remington and South.
Yeah. But what I like about this map is it still has North Sunnyvale as a community of interest, as the community that has most been burdened by the 1981 closing of Sunnyvale High School. So we have the transportation interest specifically in mind there. But she has drawn this in a way so that there is only one elementary school attendance boundary that is split, whereas the other ones that were drawn by the consultants split about, I think, 3 different attendance boundaries. So in this case, it is just the Ellis attendance boundary. So all of the Bishop and San Miguel, Lakewood, Fairwood, those attendance boundaries are all kept together. And that's because it's following the middle school. Just a comment.
Thank you. All right. So if we're good on North and Central Sunnyvale, let's give South Sunnyvale some love. All right, South Sunnyvale. So as I mentioned, here I think the conversation is less far along, primarily because thinking about South Sunnyvale, you can't really think about it in isolation from the rest of the high school district. Continuing on down to Cupertino, Saratoga, San Jose, Santa Clara. And there, the conversation has been more, kind of basic education, rather than let's get to how to draw some maps. One thing, this is a scenario map 4 from the high school district, which sought to, as far as possible, replicate the attendance boundaries for the high schools. So this largely replicates the attendance areas, especially of Monte Vista, but it does put this chunk of Los Altos with in a lot of Cupertino and Monte Vista, whereas this actually tracks to Homestead. Cupertino High School attendance area is here, and then Lynbrook is down here. All right, so this is one map where it does reflect one thing that we've heard a lot from communities in the southern part of the district, which is something along the lines of replicate school attendance boundaries, please. Whether or not that's a good idea, that is one wish that we have heard. So next, just to maybe take a slightly different take, I'm going to show a community submitted map, which might help spur some thought, especially if we have anybody from South Sunnyvale here. Could we have the next slide, please? All right, so this is a community submitted map, and what the submitter sought to do here was to think of Fremont and Homestead as being high school communities that probably have more in common, and Monte Vista and Lynbrook as high school communities that probably also have more in common in terms of, the outlook of the school, social bonds, what have you. And so in this case, this central district, and I hope it's relatively readable, but this is Fremont Avenue, so that's the northern boundary of the central trustee area. And then here, this line is 280, slightly west of 85, then 85, and then McClellan Road, De Anza, and 280 again. So trying to stick to major roadways. And so this is largely Homestead and Fremont attendance area, and then a chunk of Monte Vista. But mainly what you have is a district here that is Monte Vista and a good chunk of Lynbrook's attendance area, and then this area is Cupertino High School, and then a bit of Lynbrook for population balance. So the main, I see a comment, somebody said, hey, there's parts of Palo Alto. Yeah, the superintendent told me that the part of Palo Alto that's in the Fremont Union High School District evidently has 3 people who live there, and none of them have kids, but if they did, they'd go to Monte Vista. Who knew? Yeah, so the main one of the considerations in the southern part of the district is that's where more of the Asian American population is concentrated, and the district as a whole has about 60% of its population as Asian American, its voting population specifically. And so one thing that the maps in the southern part of the district have are, generally speaking, districts where a majority of the voting population is Asian American. So on this map, the Cupertino plus a bit of Lynbrook kind of rough district over here is majority Asian American, as is the Monte Vista. Both of them are in the neighborhood of 60%. And then this district that's more central is in the neighborhood of 45%. So one drawback of this particular map is that it does come to some cost does come at some cost of having Asian American majorities able to elect a representative. On the previous map, sorry, if we can back up to the scenario slide from the high school district. In this case, all 3 of those districts do have Asian American voting majorities. So I think that when we talk, to Charlene's question about the southern part of the district, it gets down to, what do we think the communities are where when we have our chunk of Sunnyvale north of the purple line here that we're districting, who do we, think of that part of Sunnyvale as being best grouped with? Is it, more with, this part of Los Altos that tracks to Homestead, where probably a lot of the concerns involve safe routes to Homestead High School, crossing Foothill Expressway and traveling along Homestead Road. So that's certainly one lens at which to look at this. Conversely, like this map, I said, more Asian American representation is more at the forefront of this map. So interested if we have any comments in terms of South Sunnyvale.
Yeah, I could make a comment.
Please do.
So I live in Southwest Sunnyvale and in that Notch area. I just wanted to make a comment about this keeping demographics together and how there was this desire by some to keep the Asians as, you know, maybe a voting majority in one of the areas. So the term Asian is such a covers such a wide demographic, and I just wanted to say that it's important to make sure that we look at, you know, and not group it all in one area. Like Asians, people use it to refer to Indians, Pakistanis, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and I am an Asian. I'm from Taiwan. And we are just such a diverse group, and we have immigrated to the United States at various different decades throughout history of the United States. And so the earlier immigrants versus the recent immigrants have such a different view on society and on education. So I feel that using Asians as a way to separate is just one factor, but we really need to look at it more carefully. Thanks.
I appreciate the comment. In this case, you know, one of the things that we need to comply with legally is both the Federal Voting Rights Act and the California Voting Rights Act. Under the California Voting Rights Act, Asian American is a protected class, and that is you know, the census category. So I fully appreciate you know, the comment that it's an unhelpfully broad classification, and you know, seems to imply a monolithic experience when there's a tremendous amount of diversity. So great point. Any other comments in terms of South Sunnyvale? Okay. So thank you very much for your time and attention and input. And you know, whether you you know, spoke with me today or you know want to drop a line to the trustee areas. Sorry, I'll get to you in a sec, Gail. Whether you want to drop an email to trustee areas, or even you know, for those of you who are here in person, just come up and talk to me afterwards. Really appreciate your attention and your involvement and your ideas and feedback. Thank you. Oh, and yeah.
Yeah, Doug, can you just ask folks what they think about the different maps, please? Just to get like a point of view, maybe.
Sure.
Thanks. I appreciate
that. Anybody want to weigh in on a particular map that spoke to you? Please do.
That's a duh. Okay. I like the one where North Sunnyvale, where there's two parts of Sunnyvale, north and south. That's the one I like the best. And I don't know, I don't like when it's east-west. I think that it's just kind of weird to do it east-west, but that's my own personal opinion. I hope you all side with me. North-south.
And of the three different north-south options, you know, did
I just wanted to point out
we will
something, that this is not like we are dividing neighborhoods so they can have a party and like each other together. This is more about having representation and having a lot of representation for a community. And so because they're smaller, it's cheaper and easier for the community to get their voice heard and to get their own candidate, which is not happening right now because all the candidates, or most of them, get to the south part and get to the most of them have historically been in Cupertino, and now we have the Sunnyvalians. We can do better. We can have four. Who knows? So, and it's not like because they are all together there,
they are going to recognize, that's the only way that they can recognize the issue. Again, what I'm thinking is more strategically, if you have more voices from the north, I mean, it's still being on the north, it's still being there with the other two maps when you have an east and west, but that's the kind of thing that you're going to have two advocates and two votes. When you were putting at the north, the south part, sorry, and you were pointing out this little area, Slimbrook, and they look like that's who they were, and in most of them, they're going to be by themselves, almost. And in a way, is okay, they have a strong opinion, they're very different, they think about many things differently than the other areas, so maybe it's fair. But at the end, that's going to make them being only one vote and only one people fighting for them, which I don't know, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, whatever, but this, that's a consideration. That's what I'm thinking more strategically as, yes, they are northern, Sunnyvale, both of them, but they are kind of, northeast, northwest, as trying to get as many voices as we can in the same table, at the same table, fighting about the same issues, because at the end, it's not like if you live next block is the other district, so we are not friends anymore, or we cannot have coffee. It's just not the same. It's more about having as much representation in one table, and more people fighting for the rights of those people in one table. So that's just one of many point of view. I just don't know if it's the most valid, but I like it because it's mine.
Makes
I
sense.
mean, he's right.
So Isabella, just are you, to clarify, are you Tim, could you go back a few slides, like maybe 2 slides, I think? Are you saying that the east-west split is preferable because there's a forward one, please?
Oh, I think, yeah, that one, yeah. I kind of like that one. That I don't know, the 2 and 4 are the only ones when I see that. I haven't looked at it with much detail and haven't looked exactly which street is crossing, but it seems to me that that gives more representation to the north, but yeah.
So my personal problem with this one is that there won't be dedicated representation from the north part. This was carved out so that we could maximize the Hispanic population at 28%, and it looks rather jigsaw, like gerrymandered a bit. So I prefer where there's a dedicated northern trustee, and also want to keep in mind that the trustees represent everybody in the district. I mean, Naomi's here; she knows that we've always been, a voice for all of us, especially North Sunnyvale, who hasn't had the representation. So I do prefer a north-south split, specifically the next slide, the community submitted one. And I also want to acknowledge that there aren't a lot of people that are stepping up from this part of town to run for a school board. And that is a separate issue. But when we're thinking about a trustee area that is going to continue to be like this, even after the next census in 2030, they're going to revisit it and redistrict, but they're not going to switch from a north-south model to an east-west. So I think this is the time for us to ensure that northern Sunnyvale representation.
The trustee had a Sunnyvale address. Just because a person may have a Sunnyvale residence, if they.
Can I trade you?
Okay, so a trustee who may have a Sunnyvale address may not, may be more aligned with the southern part of the district, because their children may have probably gone to Cupertino School District, and Cupertino School District and Sunnyvale School District, two very great districts, but two very different districts and different neighborhoods of interest in a sense, kind of. And so, and it's very clear from what I've heard from even my kids growing up that, just across the street, those kids think we're less than, right? So, and they all have Sunnyvale addresses. So it's just something to consider also as to, up until last year, we had 3 Sunnyvale residents, and only one had kids at Sunnyvale School District.
And it's not a coincidence that Fremont Avenue tends to be, where the both from population terms and also just that seems like kind of a logical dividing line in terms of the 2 different feeder school districts and the different experiences. Crystal.
Yeah, so I do like this option 3 that's shown here with the goes by the middle school boundaries. Because I think in a way it also does, there is a part of North Sunnyvale in this one, right? In the south part, on the western side. And so it does kind of seem like it balances both worlds a little bit because it's more of a diagonal cut instead of vertical or horizontal. And also, if we look at the yellow district, kind of the south and the west, I do live in that one. And there are issues about transportation getting to Homestead because the Homestead boundary goes that far, or maybe not all the way that far, but it's long and skinny. And so the people in the northern part of the Homestead boundaries are also challenged with getting all the way down to Homestead Road. Yeah. So that's it.
Thank you.
Hey, Doug, can I say a few words?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll put myself spotlight. There we go. So yeah, Tim, I really like this option 3. I like people who grow up in similar schools. They bonded, and having them go together in the middle schools, I think that makes a lot of sense. I also really like in the southern space option 2, again for the same reason. There is school district boundaries that tend to clump more together, and so those are my 2 options. Option 2 for the southern area, or the southmost area, and then for the central north, that option 3. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So not seeing more hands. Any hands online? If not, thank. Sandy Spires from the Council of PTAs. I remember you.
Hi, Doug. Thank you. I agree. I like the map 3 that uses the middle school, Sunnyvale Middle School attendance boundaries. That does seem like it gets communities. I just want to be careful about us saying we like using attendance boundaries because at the high school level, the attendance boundaries are very poorly balanced. So I don't want to encourage people to just go into conversations and say, yeah, we should just go by attendance boundaries. Just a little aside. Thank you.
A bit of nuance. Feeder school district attendance boundaries, which do tend to be more tightly focused on neighborhoods. Makes sense. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. This has been really engaging and interesting. And we have exceeded our time. Hopefully you're not anxious to go out into the weather, and that's why you're still hanging on here. So really appreciate your coming today. We did have time for announcements in our agenda, but we have passed our time. So if you would like to make any announcements and you would like to stay on, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will adjourn. Any announcements? Do you want to give a plug for the book group? Mike, do you want to talk about it?
We have a Sunnyvale Democratic Club group, and the next book we're reading is The Loop by Jacob Ward. It's about technology and artificial intelligence in particular, so it's a very relevant book. And we'll be meeting, I think, in a couple of weeks to talk about that. And then we'll go on to another book, and we have a number of books scheduled. So our books are pretty much all nonfiction and politically oriented because it's part of the DEM Club. So thank you very much. And looks like Tara has a.
And I would like to put in a plug for Celebrate Sunnyvale, which is coming up on the 29th. This is the kickoff of the sort of the new Chamber of Commerce, which isn't quite up and running yet, but almost. And so this is celebration, and we have some very interesting and wonderful people that are being celebrated. This used to be called the Murphy Awards. The Murphy Award is still being given, and it is now public, I believe, that Pat Vereder, a former mayor and former council member, is being recognized for her lifetime of service to Sunnyvale. So it will be a lovely evening. It is quite pricey at $200 a whop for a plate. I will say the dinners are very nice, however. So it is online. You could go online and Google it. It is the 29th from 5:30 to 9. So it's a wonderful opportunity to celebrate Sunnyvale. Thank you.
And our friends at Livable Sunnyvale are also being honored at this event as Nonprofit of the Year.
Right, great. And I just wanted to say that over the last week, there was a study and budget issue workshop at City Council. It was the entire day. There were 40 study issues to rank and 5 budget issues. Very entertaining day, and you can watch it online. Many of our favorite study issues were highly ranked, and the council had very good discussion through the whole day, and I think made a lot of great decisions. All right, with that, if there are no other announcements, let's enjoy the rest of our holiday weekend, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
It's away, right? Before you show up. Reading it. There's a way to save the chat, I think.
I think it saves it anyway.
Yeah. It's like a separate file.
It's a separate file, which
Yeah.
saves all the file.
It does? Okay. All right. I just wasn't reading anything too.
Well, maybe you can save it on music. No. What's that?